I haven't received any apologies, so I now propose we go into private session to consider certain committee matters. Is that agreed? Agreed. Now, first of all, just EU matters, Schedule A proposal. The proposal before the committee for consideration today is a proposal for a Council Directive amending Directive 2006/112/EC on the Common System of Value-Added Tax and Directive 2008/118/EC concerning the general arrangements for excise duty as regards defence efforts within the Union framework. Is it agreed that the EU proposals does not warrant further scrutiny? Is that agreed? Agreed. Now, item 8 is the Cost of Insurance Working Group. I'd like to welcome Minister Darcy and his team to our committee today. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
And today we are going to discuss the current state of play in relation to the Cost of Insurance Working Group and the issue of the cost of insurance for businesses generally. The committee has been concerned about these matters for a very significant amount of time and discussed the issues of insurance costs for small and medium-sized business in April. Very pleased to welcome Minister Michael Darcy, TD, Minister of State and Department of Finance and Public Expenditure Reform to the meeting. And your opening statement has been circulated to members. I just need to read out a note on privilege first. I wish to advise the witnesses by virtue of Section 17(2)(I) of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of their evidence to this committee, and if you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to so do, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings be given. You are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person or persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that members should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the Houses or an official either by name or in such a way as to make them identifiable. And now, Minister, I invite you to make your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome the opportunity to provide an update on the work of the Cost of Insurance Working Group to the committee. My primary focus in this address will be on business insurance. I am very conscious of the difficulties that the cost and availability of insurance are having on many businesses and voluntary community groups in the country. I can understand the frustration that many have with the existing position. I believe, however, that with the objective evidence provided by the Personal Injuries Commission benchmarking report and the higher than average award levels for soft tissue injuries in the country, we have a solid basis for addressing these difficulties through the enactment of the Judicial Council Bill. I will talk about that in more detail later. The Cost of Insurance Working Group has made it clear from the outset that there is no single policy or legislative silver bullet to immediately stem or reverse premium price rises, and that some of the necessary reforms will take time to implement. This is also recognised by this committee in its motor insurance report. The major constraints faced by any government are twofold. Award levels are the prerogative of the courts, and therefore, for constitutional reasons, the judiciary cannot be directed as to the levels that should be applied. And pricing levels are a commercial matter for insurance companies and are determined on the risks they are willing to accept. For legal reasons, the government cannot interfere in such matters, as this is prohibited by EU Solvency II directive. It was recognised, however, that there was much the government could do to improve the general environment within which insurers operate, as well as laying the ground for a more long-term transformation of the insurance market through taking issues such as award levels. This, therefore, is the context within which the Cost of Insurance Working Group needs to be considered. In this regard, I believe there have been significant progress in the implementation of the two Cost of Insurance Working Group reports. Examples include the following: addressing the personal injuries framework in Ireland through the establishment of the Personal Injury Commission and its subsequent two reports, the second of which benchmarked award levels for soft tissue injuries and made recommendations to address gaps that exist between this jurisdiction and others. The commencement by the Law Reform Commission of the examination of the possibility of capping awards in respect of some or all categories of personal injuries through legislation. Tackling insurance fraud through closer cooperation between An Garda Síochána and the insurance industry on foot of the fraud roundtable's work, and a recent decision by the Garda Commission to develop a divisional focus on insurance fraud, which will be guided by the Garda National Economic Crime Bureau, and which will also train Gardaí all over the country on investigating insurance fraud, as well as the recent successes under Operation Coty, which targets insurance-related criminality. In addition, the government has made several significant legislative changes which are in the insurance reform debate and called for by stakeholders. Increased transparency around the cost of private motor insurance through the establishment of the National Claims Information Database in the Central Bank, as well as the Court Service, confirming that it will publish a more detailed breakdown of awards in personal injury cases in its annual reports. Increasing the effectiveness of the Personal Injury Assessment Board through the Personal Injuries Assessment Board Amendment Act 19, making it easier for businesses and insurers to challenge cases where fraud or exaggeration is suspected through amendments to Sections 8 and 14 of the Civil Liability in Courts Act 2004, providing certainty to policyholders and insurers through the form of the Insurance Compensation Fund. You should also note that I look forward to the finalisation of the CSO's work regarding a price index for business insurance, as well as the Central Bank's work around potentially extending the scope of the NCID to include employer and public liability insurance, which at this point I think it should do. I will also look at how we can speed up the work related to the development of a functioning fraud database, recognising that data protection concerns must be addressed before other issues such as the governance or location of such a database can be decided. I believe the Cost of Insurance Working Group actions taken to date have helped to create a much more receptive atmosphere to which we are trying to achieve in relation to the reform of the insurance and personal injuries litigation area, insofar as there is much greater understanding of the depth and nature and extent of the underlying problems, and a much greater support for what needs to be done to address them. I also believe that these actions have had a significant impact with regard to private motor insurance. CSO figures from, there's a small change from the script and up-to-date data. CSO figures from May instead of April 19 show that the price of motor insurance is now 24.5 instead of 24.4 lower than the July 2016 peak almost 3 years ago. And I and my colleagues in government are determined to continue working to ensure that these positive pricing trends can be extended to other forms of insurance, including those relevant to businesses. I will now address the issue which I believe is key in the next phase of work of the Cost of Insurance Working Group. I am of the view that pricing the levels of personal injury damages awarded in this country more in line with those awarded in other jurisdictions is the single most essential challenge which must be overcome if there is to be the sustainable reduction in insurance costs. In this regard, the Personal Injury Commission has highlighted the significant differential between award levels in this country and England and Wales in particular, and has made a number of recommendations to address the issue, including the establishment of a judicial council to compile guidelines for appropriate general damages for various types of personal injury. I believe that this awards gap needs to be significantly closed, and I'm working with the Minister for Justice, Minister Flanagan, to ensure that this happens at the earliest opportunity through the enactment of the Judicial Council Bill, which completed its committee stage in the Shannon in April. Since then, the Government has approved the drafting of amendments for report stage in the Shannon, which will provide for the establishment of a Personal Injuries Guidelines Committee, whose sole purpose will be to develop guidelines for various types of personal injury, which will fall to be adopted by the Judicial Council. The amendments are currently subject to formal legal drafting by our colleagues in the OPC, and I'm hopeful that they will be agreed at report stage in the Shannon shortly. I have been informed, Chair, that the Shannon will be taking this next Thursday. What will be vital in getting the bill enacted as soon as possible with the cooperation of all members of the Oireachtas, and I know I can count already on support from members of this committee. This, along with the work that the Law Reform Commission has commenced, will hopefully result in the lowering of awards levels. If this were to happen, I would expect the insurance industry to take account of such reductions in their pricing. As you will recall, former Justice Justice Nicholas Kearns, former President of the High Court, Chairperson of the Personal Injury Commission, noted in the foreword of his second report that insurance industry representatives on the Personal Injury Commission repeatedly stated that as award levels and associated costs account for the bulk of the cost of insurance, if claims costs come down and are maintained at a consistent and predictable level, then premiums will also reduce accordingly. The establishment of a dedicated Garda insurance fraud unit I do want to touch upon now is important. I do want to clarify that the recommendation from the Cost of Insurance Working Group was to explore the potential for further cooperation between the insurance sector and An Garda Síochána in relation to insurance fraud investigation. While the issue, including the UK precedent, was explored in the report and the potential benefits were outlined, no commitment was given on this matter. It was made clear that it was always subject to the further examination and that any decision in relation to this matter was always going to be a matter for the Commissioner of Garda Síochána. Since my last appearance before you last year, the Garda Commissioner has made the decision for operational reasons that a divisional focus is preferable to the establishment of a centralised insurance investigation unit. I understand that this approach is aligned with a general divisional focused Garda model. It is the intention of the Commissioner that the GNECB will guide divisions and provide training in the investigation of insurance fraud. I believe that it is important to accept the expert view of the Garda Commissioner in this regard, and I am confident that this marks a key turning point in how insurance fraud will be investigated by Garda Síochána in the future. Aside from what we as a government or the Oireachtas can achieve, I would now like to turn my attention to two sectors that also have a role to play in addressing the issues that some businesses are experiencing: the legal profession and the insurance sector itself. I've spoken in the Dáil previously about the frustrations that exist among businesses and other groups regarding these two sectors. In that respect, I met with the Law Society and the Bar Council of Ireland and set out to both my belief that it was vital that they continued to give their public support and commitment to the Personal Injury Commission's recommendations. I accept the commitments which both have made since. On the insurance side, I put it to the industry that they need to provide strong public commitments very soon to reflect savings to be gained from the recalibration of awards levels. In addition, it will be important for them to widen their risk horizons and re-enter segments of the market that they have exited from previously as a measure of good faith that the claims environment should begin to stabilise once the enactment of the Judicial Council Bill has concluded. In the end, the availability and the cost of insurance to some businesses will depend on the consistency and the quantum of awards levels, and I believe that the cost of insurance working group structure remains the best means by which to continue to achieve this objective. I will also believe that the enactment of the Judicial Council Bill will be an important step forward in this regard, and I hope there will be support in the House to enable speedy conclusion to this process. In this spirit, I intend to work closely with Deputies McGrath and Doherty on considering how to progress their respective insurance-related private members' bills, the Civil Liability in Courts Amendment Bill 19 and the Consumer Insurance Contract Bill 17. I believe that this, along with the cumulative efforts of the completion of the two reports' recommendations, will include increased stability in the pricing of insurance for businesses and a more competitive insurance market overall. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now, Senator O'Donnell.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a few quick questions. First question, Minister, is in terms of the judicial, council establishment, and more particularly the terms of reference in terms of the drawing up of the guidelines. When do you envisage that? How do you envisage that we'll be able to expedite Judicial Council to be able to look at the Book of Quantum, the time frame for that, and the terms of reference under which they'll operate?
Thank you, Senator. This is my time schedule. I want to highlight that this is a schedule that is not within my control or within the control of the Oireachtas. As I said in my speech earlier, Senator, the report stage we expect will be in the Shannon next Thursday. I would hope that it will conclude in the Shannon next Thursday and then be subsequently moved to the Dáil as quickly as is possible. So, and I'm repeating myself a lot, and I do apologise for repeating myself, but I've said when it became obvious to me that we were being delayed prior to Christmas, the date at that point was to have the Judicial Council Bill before the end of 2018. When it became obvious we were being delayed, the target that I then had was the end of the summer session. That target, I think, is realisable now, Senator, and I think we can get it through the Shannon on Thursday and back into the Dáil to be concluded before the end of the summer session. I have also requested an early signature motion for the legislation to be enacted so that there is no delay, so that the President can sign the bill and the bill then becomes law. I haven't done anything beyond that, Senator. At that point, I will liaise directly with the Attorney General to try and ensure that the Judicial Council from the insurance side of things is established as quickly as possible. But I do have to highlight that the Judicial Council bill is a really large piece of legislation that is the most revolutionary reorganisation, effectively, of the judiciary for decades. And that this is the insurance side of it, while it's getting a huge amount of focus and attention, is a small corner of it. So I'm not in, and we're not in control of it here in relation to this committee. It will go before the Justice Committee at committee stage, and potentially there will be deep analysis and scrutiny, which I would expect. But I hope it won't delay the passing of the bill before the end of the summer session. That said, if we can get it through both houses, I will, again, I will speak with the Attorney General to try and influence the establishment of the Council as quickly as possible. The time schedule that I have put upon this is that we should be able to form the committee of 7 judges, 1 from each court, and have the analysis concluded and have the new guidelines in place towards the end of the year. That's my schedule. It is out of my control, it is out of our control, but I think if we all put a date on it, I think it would be helpful.
So the target you would anticipate, Minister, would be that you'd like to see is that the review of the Book of Quantum and the new guidelines, you'd hope that they would be in operation by the end of this year, 2019?
I'd like to see that the work is done, that the figures are concluded with that committee, and that the figures then become the new guidelines before the end of this year.
Thank you, Minister. 2 other quick questions. It's come up, Minister, in terms of just Brexit preparations, really, I suppose, around the area of insurance and so forth. And the question I just want to ask is, the green insurance card, how do you see that operating in terms of people being able to use their insurance cover that they have in Ireland where they travel to both either the North or the UK? So you might just give us an update of that and your views on that, Minister.
Yeah, so it's clear that people, if there is a no-deal Brexit occurs after the 31st of October, and people have insurance and they bought insurance here and their vehicle is correctly insured to travel in here in Ireland, that if they go into Northern Ireland, they're obliged to carry the green card. I'm of the view that the insurance companies should automatically send out a green card to every car that is licensed or that has an insurance policy here. It's then a matter for any individual, if they're travelling to Northern Ireland or to the UK, to bring that with them. But currently where it's at is that if you request the green card from your insurance company, it will be sent to you. I'm not satisfied with that position. That some people may or may not be aware that this will be a legal requirement that you could be requested for on the side of a road in Northern Ireland or in the UK. And I think for the number of cars that are insured, I think the right thing to do by the insurance companies is that they automatically send a green card out to everybody, and subsequently when they reinsure, that becomes part of the reinsurance that a card is sent also. This is only in the case of a no-deal Brexit, Senator. Have you had an opportunity to engage with the motor industry around this area, Minister? I intend meeting the insurance companies directly. It's something I've done on one occasion before, so I will be asking all of the insurance companies to come in, and I'll have a number of issues, and this will be one of them. And can I just follow up on one thing, Minister, if you're remiss of me? If we'll say you're looking for the insurance companies to issue, automatically issue green insurance cards without the insurance policy or having to apply with the insurance company, the issue on Brexit, the whole issue on customs registration numbers, EORI numbers, where companies post any Brexit, exporters will be required to have this number to be able to export
into the UK. As it stands at the moment, people can apply online, exporters can, and roughly my understanding is from the latest figures that I can see up to the end of May, there's roughly about an indication of about 84,000 businesses, with roughly, I'd say, about 55,000 of those, about 46,500 have custom registration numbers in place. But there's another 45%, which is roughly about 37,500 of the exporters do not have a number in place. If we're looking at an export, we'll say a Brexit situation at the end of October, could the Department of Finance engage with the Revenue Commissioners that they should now look to automatically issue the customs registration numbers, identification numbers, the EORI numbers, now to these exporters, the remainder, the 37,500, to issue them to them automatically now. So could that measure, because I think it's keeping in line with the green insurance, that to be Brexit ready, I think it's critical that any company that's out there that's exporting, because the Revenue Commissioners indicate there's roughly about 85,000 of such businesses, that they would have numbers in place. So could you take that matter up with the Revenue Commissioners, Minister?
Senator, it's very tenuously related to insurance, but
which would appreciate that we have been asked.
I did give you a fair bit of latitude, but it's not. I just remind members that this is about insurance. It would be remiss of me in the round if I did not include it, Chairman. Right?
Thank you.
It is an insurance module today. So.
Thank you very much for trying to protect me, Chair.
You don't need too much protection.
What I will do is, it isn't part of my side of the department. I will raise it with my senior minister.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Senator O'Donnell. Deputy McGrath.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Minister, you're very welcome, and your officials as well. And just as the meeting got underway there a while ago, an email landed in our inbox from the Alliance for Insurance Reform with the results of a survey that they have carried out of their members. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I think the headline to emerge from it really is that for small businesses and charities, and they had a total of 494 respondents, so almost 500 respondents, their insurance has increased by an average of over 200% in 5 years. And 49% of them now say that rising insurance costs is threatening their business, or in the case of charity, is threatening their activity and what they do. So you spoke in your opening remarks about the fact that we still don't have an index of business insurance costs, employer liability, public liability. So in the absence of official data, do you accept figures such as those discovered by the Alliance for Insurance Ireland, that these are the type of increases that are now occurring in that space?
Yeah, what I can't do, Deputy, is accept figures that are presented to me when I know nothing about how the figures have been compiled. I accept that 500 people have responded, and from those almost 500 people, the analysis is the analysis. I don't know if that's a representative sample. I don't know if it's a...
Yeah, but you don't know that it's not either.
No, I don't. Absolutely, yeah. I don't. And it's part of the problem that I saw very early in relation to insurance, was that the lack of data that was available to the entire sector at every level was something that we needed to combat. With your help, Deputy, and the other deputies of the committee and the other finance spokespersons, we passed the National Claims Information Database very quickly at the end of last year, so that we could get going in relation to the establishment of the NCID for motor, and then certainly we hope and anticipate we'll be able to get the proper data sets analysed correctly and appropriately, so we can shine a spotlight into the levels of increases, the extent of those increases are damaging companies, the length and breadth of the country.
Sure. I think what these figures show, Minister, is that when it comes to insurance premiums, we are now at crisis point. This position is not sustainable. It is closing businesses, it is threatening festivals, voluntary bodies, charities, community groups throughout the country. So, you have the full backing, I think, of this committee to do what is required to address this issue for once and for all, because those figures are not sustainable.
Well, I accept that, Deputy, and I think you know, and I think most members of the committee know, that I'm driving this as hard as it can be driven.
Can I just take it to the nuts and bolts of it? Yeah. So the process that's now underway with the Judicial Council bill, and Senator O'Donnell just teased it out with you, that will lead to a personal injuries guidelines committee. And I think what you're more or less saying is that once that bill is passed, it goes into the judicial realm. It's kind of out of your hands, really.
It is.
Yeah, but you say your expectation or your hope is that the new guidelines for award levels will be in place before the end of the year. Do we have that reassurance or indication from those who will be involved in doing this, that timeline will be met? What are you basing that on?
Well, it isn't possible for me to ask that question until I get the legislation through both houses, Deputy.
Okay, but how are you reaching that conclusion?
Pardon?
How are you reaching that conclusion that the new award levels will be set and in place by the end of the year?
No, I'm not reaching that conclusion. I'm saying this is the date that I believe it should be met by. That if the Oireachtas can organise ourselves to be quick and efficient and get the legislation through quickly and efficiently and well, there's no reason why this incredibly important piece of work cannot be prioritised.
Okay, in your view, but again, just to clarify, you have received no information or reassurance from the judiciary and those who will be involved in this committee that this work will actually be done by the end of 2019?
That's correct. And the reason why I can't ask that question is because I can't predict whether the legislation will be passed by the end of this session or not.
And if it is passed, and I imagine it will be, who will then be responsible for driving the process from there?
The first thing that I will be doing after that is I will be meeting with the Attorney General, and I'll be requesting a meeting between myself, Minister Flanagan, and the Attorney General to sit down with the Chief Justice to try and ensure and highlight the incredible emergency that insurance is having on businesses all over the country. Not just businesses and festivals and so many other areas. I think the Oireachtas has responded extremely well to this emergency, and I hope and anticipate that the judiciary will do the same.
Can I ask you, Minister, what else can be achieved this side of the summer recess by this House in relation to insurance? Well, so that's the key bill.
Yeah. Well,
what else can be achieved?
Well, if we could add to your bill also, Deputy, if we could get it over the next stage, I think it'd be very helpful. I think it'd be very helpful to get Deputy Doherty's bill over the next stage, so that the last pieces for both potentially would be report stage prior to the budget. Okay. And I think if we could get, we concluded 3 pieces of legislation last year. NCID, the PIAB bill and the Insurance Amendment Bill. And if we could get Judicial Council bill through this year and your bill and Deputy Doherty's bill, I think the Oireachtas will have responded very well in relation to the emergency that is insurance at the moment.
And just to let you know, Minister, this committee earlier decided that we will invite in the major insurance companies to come in before this committee to discuss the issues in the insurance industry, the reforms they want to see and what they can give in return to their policyholders and consumers. So we would hope to do that before the Dáil rises in mid-July. Those invitations will go following this committee. I think that is happening.
I think that would be a really important body of work. I've met with Insurance Ireland, represented body for the insurance companies. I will be meeting with the insurance companies individually as well. But the position that I have taken with Insurance Ireland, and I want to be very clear on this, there cannot be any delay from the insurance companies following the enactment of the Judicial Council bill in relation to premium. We are on a very clear pathway, and the pathway is to reduce awards, which will then reduce premium. I don't want to hear from the insurance companies that in about 2 years' time, after we go through a certain number of cases, after we go through a period of time, that our underwriters will consider the matter. There needs to be good faith shown to the Oireachtas, both houses, for the level of support that has come to try and get the legislation through to improve the sector. And the level of good faith must come from the insurance companies to impact upon the premium which they are currently charging.
Sure. Well, I mean, just to say, we expect them to come before us because of the importance of these issues for our society, for our economy, for consumers, for motorists, for businesses, for voluntary bodies, charities and so on. So we expect the big companies who will now receive an invitation and they can come in and explain their case and give their perspective on the insurance industry at this time, the challenges, their suggestions as to what needs to be done and also what impact, if those suggestions are taken on board and put into effect, the impact that will have on premiums. And so we look forward to them hopefully accepting those invitations and coming before us. Finally, Minister, just in the whole area of fraud, it has been very frustrating trying to get information and data. And you have spoken publicly that there were 2 cases, I think you said recently, where people were actually convicted of insurance fraud. Would you be able to get for this committee information as to the number of cases that have been brought under the 2004 Act, the Civil Liability in Courts Act, the number of prosecutions that have been brought, convictions secured? Can you get that data? Because I certainly can't.
Okay, well,
and I've tried.
Yeah, so we're trying to get all of that data. We have some data, Deputy, and there have been 50 cases of insurance fraud reported to the GNECB in relation to blatant fraud. Since last October.
Yeah, that's very recent now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since last October.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and to put that into context, 25 of those have been staged accidents. So those are the figures that we have. I know that there are other figures put out there that there have been hundreds and hundreds of cases presented, but October to now is 9 months. So we have 3/4 of figures in relation to those cases, but that's the actual number of cases presented for fraud.
Sure, but what I'm asking, and I'm sure your department is doing this, is to engage with the court service. We want to get the data as to what has happened under that 2004 Act in respective cases brought. Yeah. How many prosecutions have been brought and how many convictions have been secured? Yeah, I mean, is it too much to ask that we get that data? Yeah, will you write to the committee
we will liaise
with what you have now and what you're trying to get?
Yeah, I'll do that, Deputy. Yeah.
And okay, thanks, Chair. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Deputy McGrath. Deputy Doherty.
Carla, and welcome the Minister and his officials to the committee, and welcome his remarks in relation to, in particular, my own bill, which is past second stage now nearly 2 years, and we've agreed at this committee that we will bring it to committee stage and deal with amendments in the second week of July, and I know the government has given the money message for this, so I look forward to the passage of this bill into law. Can I start with just in relation to your opening statement, Minister? You talked about that you put it to the industry that they need to provide strong public commitments very soon to reflect savings to be gained from the recalibration of award levels. And the question I have for you is, have you received a single commitment from the industry yet that this will happen? We know, for example, in 2002 that the Insurance Federation, Insurance Ireland's predecessor, made a very clear commitment at that time where they outlined a list of reforms that they believed was required, and if such reforms were enacted, there would be a reduction in premiums by a certain percentage. There was clear transparency here, because I don't know if you trust the insurance industry, but I don't trust the insurance industry. They're involved in price gouging. They're involved in a lot of spin. They're involved in a lot of bluster. They're involved in a lot of distraction in relation to what is the real reasons why premiums are increasing. I'm not saying that their issues are not real issues that need to be dealt with, like exaggerated claims and frauds. We need to have a zero tolerance attitude towards that. But when we see today that they have increased their profits by 1,300% in a 1 year, that they've made nearly €250 million profits on the back of motorists who are hard pressed, on the back of businesses who are seeing their public liability increase, that tells me that this is simply price gouging from the industry. So have you received a commitment from them similar to the commitment that was there in 2002 from the Irish Insurance Federation, which said very clearly that, for example, You know, if there was anti-fraud measures, it would result in a 2% reduction. If there was a book quantum, it would be 1%. If there was the PIAB, it would be 7.6%, and so on. Very clear, very verifiable. Because my concern is, while we need to do this in relation to the book of quantum, dealing with the Gardaí in relation to how they're going to enforce action on fraudulent claims, that there's no guarantee whatsoever that any of this will be passed on to the customers, and the past experience is that the industry will just pocket this money.
Thanks, Deputy. The one thing that I absolutely am clear about, Deputy, is that we are doing all of this work so that the benefit that will flow to the consumer, the person who is paying the premium, not towards the insurance company. I've said made pretty strong statements about the insurance companies. I don't hold them in high regard. They always win. They are the people who charge you the premium, and they're the people who are in charge of the allocation of an award, if there is an award. The sector got to a point in relation to the levels of awards for the smaller claims, the methodology in which those smaller claims remain on an insured person's premium and on the insurance company's books for a huge period of time before they get settled. And then the biggest issue is the level of the award. And the Pearse Doherty Commission report highlighted that the difference is between about 4.5 times. The Department of Finance have done an analysis, and it was 5 times, and PIAB did an analysis, and it was almost 5 times as well. I'm talking about the lower levels of awards. And the insurance sector was represented on the Pearse Doherty Commission also. And they, on occasion after occasion, have said that if the award levels are reduced, so too will the premium. I'm the person who has said to the chairman of this committee that you are the people who should bring the insurance company in. This is a public forum, and you should put that exact question to them as well. I will be putting that question to them, Deputy, company by company, individually. They won't be doing that. That won't be happening in public. And I will be keeping a very hard line to them to ensure that what you have said doesn't happen, which is for the insurance companies to trouser the monies potentially if the awards come down and the premiums stay high. That is not what this is about. And I have met with Insurance Ireland, and I put that same line, that same language to Insurance Ireland in relation to this matter.
I don't question your objective here in relation to making sure that this is passed on to customers. You know, you've made the point that you don't hold them in high regard. The point here is that 17 years ago, we were able to get the insurance industry to produce a table, right? The table's very clear. It had, you know, road safety, PIAB, reduction in insured driving, promotion of rehabilitation, abolition of the 2% stamp duty, reform of the courts, anti-fraud, exclusion of earnings from the black economy, reduced plaintiff solicitors' fees, book of quantum, repeal of the Health Act. And they said if that was done, and they individualised each one of them, that would result in a reduction in premiums of 36.35%. Now, we've been here before, and we've seen insurance premiums increase over a period over 70% according to the CSO for motor insurance. And the insurance industry tells us it was all because of Setanta. Now, we fixed Setanta. We fixed the issues in relation to Setanta and the risks that insurance companies would have through the legislation. Yet we haven't seen in premiums drop by 70%. But what we've got on the other side of it is the companies have increased their profits by 1,300%.
As our Deputy, the figures in relation to motor insurance is a reduction of 25.5% from the peak of 3 years ago, July 16. So those are the figures. In relation to motor insurance year on year, there was a loss for motor insurance in 2016 of €75 million. And then there was a profit on motor insurance of 59.7, almost 60 million euros in 2017. Make no mistake, and I know the figures that were quoted are the figures that are quoted, and they are correct on the basis of how they're presented. But when a sector loses 75 million in a year, it's why insurance companies are exiting and have exited the market, the Irish market. I would remind you that year on year, that of all personal injury claims, it ranges between 70 and 80% of whiplash claims are from that one aspect of personal injury, whiplash. So the figures are the figures. 75 million euro loss. I'm not here to defend insurance companies, make no mistake. They're clever enough and well able to defend themselves. But a 75 million euro loss in 16 being converted into a 60 million euro profit in the scheme of things is a different complexion than what was presented.
Yeah, but okay, as you said, the figures are accurate. The insurance industry made a profit last year of 227 million euro. It was coming from a point where they weren't making profit, or some of them were making profit the year before, but they've made a massive profit, a €250 million profit. And I'm not saying that insurance companies shouldn't be profitable. Of course, we need insurance companies that are profitable. But should they be making it off the back of drivers and businesses and people in community groups who are trying to run festivals and all that? No, they should not. And what they're not willing to give us is a commitment of if we introduce reforms such as the Judicial Council Bill, that they will reduce premiums. That's the problem here. And the problem here is this. They're making these profits at a time when they're telling us that claims are far too high, or that fraudulent activity is there and all the rest. Yet, the claims were as high last year and the year before, and so on and so forth, for the last number of years. Fraudulent activity has been going on for forever and a day. And, the reality is, the insurance, and I take a zero tolerance position with fraudulent activity. You know my position on it. I believe strongly we should have a centralised Garda enforcement unit. We have agreed in this committee to invite the Garda Commissioner in before us to tease out how he is going to look at the model that he wants to deploy. So I take a zero tolerance in relation to fraudulent claims. But what I don't fall for is the spin from the industry that fraudulent claims are the reason why premiums have gone up, or that it is the level of awards. And a good example of that there, Minister, is the industry only reported in 9 months 50 fraudulent claims.
That's my point, Deputy.
If the issue was so big, as they state in all of their advertisements, that it's costing everybody €50 extra on their premiums, then there would be thousands of claims that would be reported. Now, I have no doubt that there's more than 50 fraudulent claims in the system. I have no doubt about that. But the reality here is they're price gouging. And if we deal with fraudulent claims, if we set up the Garda, enforce their action, if we're far better and robust at prosecution and so on, and deterring people from making fraudulent claims, I'm not convinced that the premiums will reduce a penny, because this is all about the core of this here was back to the point. These companies were gambling. And it wasn't gambling with people's premiums. They were basically investing in the bond market with their premiums. When the returns in that fell, their profits fell. Now what they did was they put up prices to cover that fall. And, unless we get something like this here, and I think we need to take a very, very tough approach. I think there's been a kid's glove approach from all of government, maybe not from yourself, Minister, but from the rest of government. I think some of your colleagues really let you down over the last period of time in a number of ways. But unless we get clear commitments from the industry, I don't know how we can ensure, and we can't, that a private company who is based on profits for its shareholders is actually going to pass on any of the reductions, that any reforms that we bring in at the Oireachtas will actually benefit.
Yeah. Can I say, Deputy, that I'm not sure if you've heard me make the point, but I've made the point on numerous occasions that for every fraud case, there are hundreds of exaggerated claims. And for every exaggerated claim, there are hundreds of legitimate claims who are awarded funds on the basis of the Book of Quantum in line with the awards levels. Fraud, we are told, costs about €200 million to the sector. That's a figure, that's an industry figure. I don't have an actual figure, I don't have a figure. But you must remember, the vast majority of claims are legitimate. This is something that I have a bit of a concern that is happening right now, and you are, and I do highlight, and I applaud your strength of which you are opposed and consistently oppose fraudulent and exaggerated claims, as I do, as I think everybody else does as well. But the big issue that we come down to is there was over €2 billion awarded to people in relation to claims. €2 billion. It's a huge quantity of money. And what we're trying to do is to put in place a structure where people who are affected by a moderate incident, they get a moderate amount of funding in compensation, in damages, to compensate them for that incident. And again, I'm talking about the lower levels of claims, not the higher levels of claims. It is important to put that into context. And that was the nuts and bolts of what the Pearse Commission report is about.
Yeah, and I agree with the objective there, right? But to take for a hypothetical situation, if by setting up the Judicial Council, if by passing the Judicial Council bill, if by setting up that panel, and if that panel, and there's a number of ifs here, recommend, for example, that soft tissue injuries and whiplash would be cut by half, which make up the majority of claims in the first instance, the industry isn't turning around and telling us that they will reduce premiums, that this will result in a premium reduction of X%. You know, there is nothing from the industry side, and so they've kind of forced us into a corner here, which we would deal with anyway. If the claims are too high, they're too high. If there's fraudulent claims, they need to be stomped out. But the problem here is that the industry's sitting back and looking at their profits increasing dramatically. They're seeing these reforms, which are only going to push up their profits unless they decide to pass them back. So if they're telling us that high claims for soft tissue industry is affecting them, they'll be able to do the calculations. They should be able to turn around and say, well, if the Book of Quantum said X amount for soft tissue, say 7,000 as opposed to 15,000, then that would result in a premium reduction for motorists of 10% across the board. Hypothetical figures. They're not willing to do that. Why, in my view? Because they don't want to be held accountable. And I think that's the point where we need to get them to where they were in 2012, when there was an action plan at that time, where we were in the same type of crisis, where there was a commitment from them. But Insurance Ireland is a different animal from its predecessor, and I would encourage you to do that. Can I maybe, I want to talk about the central bank as well, and this is a core area here. The central bank ceased publishing its private motors insurance statistics. Right? It's done that since 2015. But in 2015, the statistics told us something very, very clear, right? And just to go through this, to remember what I said. It says, in terms of the average cost per policy, which combines the cost per claim and claim frequency, it says the average cost per policy year one declined for both comprehensive and third party and fire in 2015. The average cost per policy decreased by 4% in 2014 and 15, from 272 down to 261. Third party reduced from 282 or 288 down to 272. In terms of frequency, comprehensive policies seen a decrease of, these are claims, from 5.2 claims per 100 policies in that year compared to the previous year, where it was higher. Third party claims seen a decrease of 3.7 claims per 100 claims. In 2015, the stats show that the cost to insurers appear to have fallen. So when we had transparency, when the central bank was producing the private motor insurance statistics, what we were able, the last time they published them in 2015, we were able to see that the cost per policy was reducing for comprehensive, the cost per policy was reducing for, and this is the cost to the insurers, was reducing for third party. The number of claim frequencies, the number of claims that have been were being made were reducing, 5.2 for every 100, for both comprehensive and third party. The cost to the insurers were falling, yet premiums, what happened to premiums? In the same year, when all of that was happening, premiums from January to December 2015 went up by 30%. Now, there is only one beneficiary Only one beneficiary of us or the central bank ending the private motor insurance statistics, and that is the insurance companies, because they can come in here and tell us bullshit about claims, about premiums, about this, that and the other, and we don't have the statistics. We have to rely back in 2015 when we can see very clearly that everything was going in the other direction, but yet they decided to increase the premiums by 30%. So I would argue strongly with you, Minister, we need to get those data back. It's one of the big issues in terms of transparency. We need to have the granular detail. We need to know exactly what's going on with this industry, and this is an industry that's under investigation both domestically and at European level, and rightly so, so that we can make a proper calculation of what is actually happening. And in my view, the CSO also has a role in relation to calculating the real cost of insurance for both motorists and for businesses. And I know I've spoke to you about this before, but the idea, and my understanding is, because the insurance companies are wise to this, the idea of the CSO phoning up, as they do, and I have absolutely huge regard for the CSO, absolutely brilliant, but the idea of them phoning up and saying, hello AXA Insurance, this is Mr. So-and-so from the CSO, we're doing our monthly survey on insurance costs, and we want to ask you what's the price you would do for this, that and the other. The insurance companies are wise to this. Like, if I phone up looking for an insurance premium of a company and you phone up looking for the same, you can get two different quotes. You know, they know that it's not that they know that it's the CSO. The CSO introduced themselves. So there's now a question around the credibility of the CSO data. The insurance industry themselves are disputing the CSO data when the premiums were going up, when they were saying the premiums were increasing by 70%. And now the others, advocates and consumers, are questioning the CSO data because they believe it's been manipulated by the industry. And that's not something that I think that any of us should be shocked about from that point of view. Because all of the evidence, and Deputy McGrath talked about it, from the Insurance Reform Alliance, all the evidence from consumer groups, from our own experience, is that it's not reflected, what the data show now is not reflected what individual experiences are out there.
Thanks, Deputy. Just to respond back to your previous piece, Deputy, first of all, my colleagues in government didn't let me down. I just want to make that point because it's been said quite a bit. I was given full authority to deal with this by Minister Donoghue, and he told me to go and deal with it. And I don't think anybody is questioning my commitment to dealing with the insurance difficulties that we have at the moment. And subsequently to that, when it looked like there was going to be an issue of the Judicial Council bill slowing down or getting delayed, I went to the Taoiseach, and the Taoiseach gave me his full support. And the reason we're back on track now is because of the support from the Taoiseach, the Minister for Finance and the Minister for Justice. In terms of what you're saying, Deputy, goes back to 2015 in relation to increases. What shocked me most of all was the lack of data, the lack of information when I came into this job. I'm in the job 2 years. So you asked me to comment upon what happened 2 years before I actually came into the job. I can't. But what I will comment upon is what will happen in the next 2 years. So the Cost of Insurance Working Group met during the week. The Central Bank were there. I pushed them very strongly in relation to the National Claims Information Database. The work started on that immediately after the legislation was passed, and the work is happening. I'm hopeful we can get the figures from the National Claims Information Database and have granular analysis in relation to the entire motor sector first. We will have that in this calendar year. I'm pushing them very strongly for Q3, which isn't very far away. I can't give a commitment that it will be Q3. I have a commitment from the Central Bank that it will be before the end of the year. So we will have the information analysed. We will have
only on claims.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So the information will be upon the management expenses, other expenses including the other nature of components, the commission written and earned, the investment income and other income including those other components. So it isn't just claims, Deputy.
Yeah, but we're missing when the Central Bank, and there's no reason why the Central Bank should have stopped this, today we're able to quantify, publish for us the cost of insuring the average comprehensive policy, third-party policy, whether that was reducing or increasing, and there's an absence of that data, and we need that data immediately.
Yeah, that'll be in the NCID, Chair, our Deputy.
And so you're saying that that will be produced
For
in the
the end
third
of this
quarter?
year. I'm pushing for the third quarter. I can't guarantee it, but it will be before the end of the year.
But we won't have public liability as part of it?
No, we won't.
And when will we have public liability?
We want to make sure that we get the first year's information collated correctly and appropriately. The information will be collated, and we want to move then into public liability at that stage. The public liability and employers' liability is more difficult than motor, and I've highlighted that from day one. It's a lot more diverse. You have many more sectors, and there is a lot more work involved in that. But we want to try and start with the NCID for motor first. It's where the largest claims are, and the bigger claims and the larger amounts. Sorry, I'll actually read out the note, Deputy. The extension of the NCID to cover ELPN claims will increase transparency for these types of non-life insurance. The Act has been drafted to allow for the extension of this scope in line with the recommendations. The Central Bank has initiated a project to study the merits and feasibility of expanding the scope to employers and public liability. The Bank will engage with external stakeholders, including industry and consumer representative groups, to convey the key data requirements for EL and PL. The Bank will research EL-PL insurance environment in other jurisdictions, including focusing on data availability. The Bank plans to produce a feasibility report for the Cost Insurance Working Group by Q4 of this year, including recommendations for EL and PL data submission requirements. So the work has started on this, Deputy, and while it won't be available for the end of this year for the actual analysis, but the thought process has started to try and move into the EL and PL space immediately.
Okay, let me go to my final question on this here, and I just want to reiterate again that without the commitment of the insurance industry for reductions in premiums in aligned with reforms that we will introduce, that's the key issue.
It is.
And I know you've said you've asked. I'm not questioning you. I don't want to go into that space. I wasn't talking about your government colleagues. I was talking about your parliamentary colleagues that let you down, in my view. But in relation to, we need a commitment from the industry, as was given in 2002, that reforms will result in reductions. That's what consumers out there want. In relation to the last question, and I know that there was a lot of to and fro and juggling and manoeuvring, and I welcome that from yourself in terms of the Judicial Council bill and the filibuster that was going on that was delaying a lot of stuff, and people need to maybe look at themselves in relation to that. But the amendments have taken quite a long period of time, and I'm glad to hear you've said now the amendments are ready, and that this is going before the Shannon next week. Again, there's a lot of ifs here because we don't know. We're putting this into the hands of judges. And can I ask you for a plan B? So we set up a panel of judges based on seven-person panel. And what if they come back and say that the awards are fine, that the Book of Quantum is what the Book of Quantum is? What is plan B? Or is there a plan B, or is there anything else that can be done? I know this is the right course of action, sure, at this point in time, but... Yeah,
I think we all accept that this is the right course of action. And we have to rely on the judiciary in line with the PIC report, which said that the Court of Appeal decisions, the precedents that have been in place, have to be considered in relation to the Judicial Council and the committee within the Judicial Council to have regard for those levels of awards, and also for them to have regard for the levels of awards in the in England and Wales, where the analysis was done that was independently verified by KPMG to analyse Irish awards and make a reference to similar awards in Ireland versus England and Wales. And we all believe that this is the correct pathway, no question about that. Plan B, Deputy, is with the Law Reform Commission have started the process to see, do we have the authority to cap the levels of awards? They will do their body of work, and they will conclude their body of work as soon as possible. It has started already, which is good, and I welcome it. And I'd welcome it being concluded sooner rather than later, so that if Plan B is required, that this could be part of Plan B. If that is the case, well, certainly I think we'll know if we have the authority to limit the levels of award. That said, none of us know what's going to happen, and if in the circumstance that you've outlined, that the judiciary come back and say the levels are fine, well, that's a matter for the Oireachtas to decide if potentially the way we deal with this is a referendum to give the Oireachtas the authority to cap the levels of awards based upon perhaps the LRC come back and say that the Oireachtas doesn't have the authority to cap the awards. Well, that's another plan. That's plan C.
Okay. I'm finished on that there, bar this last comment. Again, I would have to question if it was in this body that we're capping the level of awards. And, you know, I take your point that, you know, I agree 100% with your point that there's thousands of people who make legitimate claim. Some of the, you know, these claims that we see, and I think Charlie Weston in particular has brought huge attention to this issue in relation to exaggerant and fraudulent claims, and it needs to be commended in relation to what he's done there. But there's a danger that people are thinking that everybody's a scammer or a chancer and all the rest, right? Yeah. A lot of people don't make claims who have legitimate claims because they're going to lose their no claims bonus. So they go and they pay for the garage to fix their car themselves and all the rest. And others don't make claims because they think it would bring bad luck or whatever it is, and you know, just that's the way it is. But why would we reduce the level of awards so a private company could benefit from that if we were not satisfied that would be passed on? Like, I would be very reluctant to do that.
Deputy, none of us, not a single one of us in either house are doing that and want that done. And you asked me to get a commitment from the insurance companies. I'm probably not able to get a commitment from the insurance companies in writing, but I will keep the flashlight in the insurance company's face so that, and you've heard my senior minister, Minister Flanagan, talk about profiteering of insurance companies. None of us want that. We want the insurance sector to be put on a stable footing in this country so that we can have companies who can come in and be competitive and be profitable and have a stable structure in place so that we have proper competition. We have 8 companies with ranging for the last number of years between 89 and 92% of the sector. We aren't big enough. We don't have enough companies competing for the business that's here.
Would Minister, sorry, finally, I know I've said finally, but just let me ask this question, if you don't mind. When we were dealing, and we're still dealing with high mortgage interest costs in this state, one of the threats that was issued at the time, because the banks weren't willing to move, is that if they didn't move, that we would increase the amount of reserves that they would have to hold, the amount of capital that they would have to hold, which would put them in a disadvantaged position. This was a threat, a bottom or a big stick to try and to get them to move. Are you within your department looking at options like that, as opposed to moral suasion, that we would look at other instruments that would say to the industry, folks, you need to move because we've other tools in our toolbox, and if you're going to continue to rip off your customers, then we're going to act as an Oireachtas.
Deputy, I want to be very clear. I haven't been shy on being tough with the insurance companies from the moment I came into the job, and that won't change. I'm here to protect the consumer, not the insurance companies, and I think that's relevant to everyone else in this chamber and the other chamber as well.
Thank you, Gerry, and thank you, Minister, for your opening statement. I just want to go back to and I appreciate the point you're saying you don't know where the figures came from, but I just want to draw some attention to the Alliance for Insurance Reform survey that was only circulated to us today. It was 494 responses they got. The largest sector was motor and transport. Next was hospitality, leisure, retail, not-for-profit, healthcare, arts and entertainment, and finally other was only 6%. And of those questions, there wasn't that many questions, but the question 3 that was answered by all 494, nobody skipped it, since 2015, by how much has your insurance cost risen? And the average answer is 204%. That's what they're saying. Has your insurer increased excesses or added new exclusions? 28% increased excesses, 11% added new exclusions, 23% both, and 36% say neither. Which of the following best describes the impact rising insurance has on having on your organisation? Biggest answer was 48.58%. They can only answer 3 or use 3 options. 48.5% threatening the future of the organisation, 45% inhibiting their ability to grow, 32% preventing them from providing certain services, 25% making jobs less secure. And this is not against you, Minister, personally. Do you think the government is doing enough to address the issue? 494 respondents, 2 said yes, 23 didn't know, and 469, almost 95%, said no. So that's just a flavour of what's there. And these are people who took the time. They're people involved with the industry, and we've had people in here, play centres, events, festivals, playgrounds, local authorities, pubs, restaurants, and every one of us, and I'm sure, Minister, particularly in the job you're doing, I don't doubt that every time you go to a public function, every time you're somewhere, people are talking about insurance. I'm the chair of a school board, and I know of school boards that have gone from 27,000 a year to 34,000 a year for absolutely no new claim, no prospective, even incident that's happened, nothing. It's just you were all in a group package. That agreement is over, and we're now just increasing the charge by a very significant amount. And for most people, insurance, it's a necessary. You have to have it. You can't afford not to have it. But by and large, as we know, and Minister, you were on this committee at the time we did all our work on motor insurance, that 92% of people in motor insurance are not claiming. It's 8% are costing all of the premiums and so on, whether it's the legal industry makes money out of it, whether it's insurance money making money out of it, and certainly they're making money now, but there was a time we certainly had figures that said they weren't making money out of it. But there's an enormous amount of frustration there. And I, as a member of the Senate, will be certainly happy to progress as speedily as possible the Judicial Council Bill next Thursday. It's at its final stage. I think it should be done very quickly, report in final stage. I think there's maybe 30 government amendments, I think it was, in and around. Being talked about. Yeah, for insurance. Yeah, in relation to that. And I'm certainly happy to progress as fast as possible. And we were ready to take it in the Senate as soon as it was offered. I don't think any other bill that was being talked about delayed it, and we were happy to schedule it and to process it as soon as it was scheduled to us. And I suppose really, the object of this afternoon, your opening statement lists all the good work that's being done, and it is good. Judicial Council bill, I hope. I don't portray all insurance companies as evil. I don't portray all legal people out there. I have family members who are involved in the solicitors and so on. But there is an enormous, I suppose, the awards that are out there that are available to people for what seems to most people to be very minor are an attraction, are a reason. I said it before in the Senate. People who go into a bank and try and rob it, if they're caught, they'll probably go to jail. They'll end up with a sanction. People who make a false insurance claim, by and large, if they get caught, it's just, that's it, thanks very much, next, and come back next week and try again. And I think we do need to see whether it's on a divisional level or otherwise, and we are bringing in the Garda Commissioner, which I think is helpful, and we are bringing in the insurance companies. It is morally and socially not acceptable to be making claims, very exaggerated claims, and indeed staging accidents. It is not okay. There is a cost. Social welfare cheat us all was this campaign that went out there. Insurance fraud is costing every one of us money, and most of us cars, you have your car, you're not making any incident, and yet the insurance, we have seen some drop. I acknowledge I saw a small drop from a very large increase over a couple of years. My own premium this year, and I welcome the work you're doing. But really, Minister, when do you think we can see real, genuine restaurants, pubs, charities, events, festivals? When are they going to see, do you think, a genuine, meaningful reduction? We know it's about reducing the volume of claims. We know it's about reducing the value of claims. Ideally, of course, in motor insurance, it's about having less accidents and less crashes. But when do you see a really meaningful thing? Because these businesses are closing, are under pressure. You know this. You're doing the work on it. But when can you give them some hope?
Thanks, Senator. Yeah, just revert back to the alliance figures of the 494. So if a lot of those are motor, the only insurance you are legally obliged to have is motor insurance. You're not legally obliged to have any other form of insurance. And the motor insurance was where the Cost of Insurance Working Group started. There's been a 24.5% reduction from the peak in 2016. The 2016 increase of 69% was on a very low base where there was a price war that turned out to be a catastrophe for the sector. And when you have the cost of insuring a vehicle less than the cost of a windscreen, well, certainly it didn't work out well for any of us. So the price war drove people out of the sector, companies went bust, companies exited, and as a result, insurance started to increase. So I do want to say that if we accept the CSO figures on the increase, we also have to accept the CSO same analogy and the data compilation on the decrease. So I would be surprised at a 204% increase on motor in that period that you've outlined, when in that period the CSO figures say that the numbers are going down.
It was actually, I think it was 24% of the respondents were in the motor transport sector. It was overall, the respondents were 494, about 25% are in that sector. But there's hospitality and retail, the people were saying that their overall insurance cost has gone up.
Yeah. But even if that is the case, if a quarter of the people responded from the motor sector, I'd be surprised if those people, but anyway, look at it.
They're averages, but
yeah,
still.
That's fine, yeah. But what I do want to highlight for people say the government should do more, and the government haven't done enough. The government isn't the regulator. We don't regulate the sector. The Central Bank of Ireland regulates it. I was at a meeting recently with people speaking about insurance, and I explained the Judicial Council bill. And a woman responded to me that we should tell the judges what to do now that we have a panel of 7. Again, under separation of powers, we don't have the authority to do that. Again, people think the government should tell the judges what to do. We are putting in place a structure that if it's required, the LRC will make a determination whether we have the authority to do so or not. If it's not, and there isn't a change in relation to the amounts, well then potentially the only way the Oireachtas acquires the authority is via a referendum. And I've said we're prepared to look at that, depending upon the outcome. It's not where I want to go. I don't want to have to go down that pathway. But if we have to go down that pathway, well, it's something we will consider. And again, people have the perception that the government should price insurance. In a major editorial by a very respected business newspaper, it said that the government should consider entering the insurance market. We are expressly prohibited from doing so by law. So people have this perception government should do this and this and this in those areas where we are disallowed. And we can't go there. And if we go there, we'll end up in the courts, wrapped up for years, and the reforms that we're trying to do will not happen at all. And nobody wants that. Everything that we are doing or have not done, there is a reason, Senator, I can assure you. So the period in time that I'm saying, and I put this very strong to Insurance Ireland, Senator, that in my view, the moment the Judicial Council bill is passed, that a show of good faith from the insurance companies should be for, one, their risk appetite to improve, and also for their premium to reduce immediately. They say to me, we don't know this is going to be passed, and that's a fair question, or a fair statement from Insurance Ireland. If it doesn't get passed in the summer session, will it be passed in 2019? It probably will be, but it'll be the end of the year. So you're looking at then the decision by the formation of the committee taking longer, the formation of the committee taking longer, and then the decision within the committee taking longer again. If we don't get this done before the end of this session, you could be looking at the end of 2020 before this happens. And that, to me, would be a catastrophe. And that's why I'm pushing so strongly that the legislation through an early signature motion from the President for the Council to be formed and they get on with their work as quickly as is possible. But in my view, and I put this to Insurance Ireland and I'll be putting it to companies directly, they need to start and show good faith towards us for the work that we have done to try and improve the sector. And we have all done that. Those who are on this committee, those who are in the Dáil and the Seanad, and we're doing everything we can to try and improve the sector in its totality. And I'm fine with companies making profit. I'm not fine with companies profiteering.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Just to explain that figure about the insurance cost, it was get your 2019 renewal minus your 2015 cost divided by the 2015 cost, and that was their insurance cost generally. It wasn't about motor insurance, it was about whatever cost they have. And while they're not only legally obliged under law to have motor insurance, you'd be a very unwise restaurant, play centre, event space, pub to try and operate in a world without insurance. And why they have, some of them have talked about kind of reinsurance or self-insurance schemes and so on. You know, very few business owners want to put their own personal exposure to any kind of claim that could happen in any event, and I don't think any of us would expect them to do so. Just in terms of, and I accept all the points you made, in terms of the visibility, the National Claims Database and so on, we have, you know, for a long time said we don't know what's going on, we can't see what's going on. When are we actually going to get some decent visibility on figures?
Yeah, so the figure, the date that I have, I pushed them for the end of Q3.
Of this year? Of
this year, in terms of the motor for an NCID. And I can't guarantee, it is a stretch for it to be ready by the end of Q3, but they have said to me that for certain it will be available in 2019.
And that's going to give us exactly, is that going to give us details of claim payouts, insurance?
Management expenses, other expenses, including the nature of the components, settlement channels, commission written and earned, investment income, and income in relation to other natural.
And that'll be on a total industry basis?
Industry basis, yeah.
Okay, so we get an idea then of how profitable or otherwise
Correct.
They appear to be more than before. And I think that is welcome. It's taken quite a bit of time, but it's there.
Well, Senator, it isn't taking quite a bit of time.
Well, it's just, no, I mean, it's taking quite a bit. We were talking about this in 2016. Is my point is that the time taken from when it finally became law.
To be fair to the central bank, they had started the work before the legislation was finished, and they were ready to go. And again, you know, I've complimented members of both houses for the flexibility that they've shown towards the NCID last year, at the end of last year, at the end of the winter session, and then this time last year, the Insurance Amendment Bill. Again, the flexibility and the speed at which members were prepared to bring the legislation through. So the central bank had started the work prior to the legislation being finished and ready to go, so that they were able to start in January of this year, so that they would have the work finished in the calendar year of 2019.
And the visibility we're going to see, is that motor insurance only for the moment?
Motor insurance only initially.
And what's the plan then in terms of public liability, employer liability?
Move into that sector after the first year's information is made available.
So we should see that maybe in Q3 of 2020?
I can't give a commitment on it yet, Senator.
And what's the reason that we can't see visibility?
Well, it's a lot more varied sector than motor. So when I put it to you like this, there's a very great difference between a play zone and a nightclub. A play zone and a business that might be a meat factory. So there's a huge difference between the sectors in terms of business and employer and PL versus motor, which is pretty standard. The difference is the range of vehicles rather than the sector, which could be...
And I accept that you can't give a guarantee as to when, but what's the process in terms of when they're going to start collecting information, or what's the journey in terms of motor has started? Is it anticipated they're going to start nightclubs or restaurants or play zones or meat factories or marts or whatever happens to be? When is that starting?
Yeah. So the date that we have, and we are putting a warning on this, the feasibility of this may turn out to be a lot different when the work starts. But the bank plans to produce a feasibility report for the Cost of Insurance Working Group by the end of this year in relation to EL and PL, in relation to data submission requirements. But we are saying this is a lot more varied, different sector than motor. And we are satisfied that we will have a good handle on the NCID data for motor for this year. We are unsure the extent of which it will flow into EL and PL. There is a presumption that it will, but we can't guarantee that.
Okay, well, just to conclude, Chairman, just to thank you, Minister, for your own efforts on this and your officials around you. But I think it is important that this committee does get regular updates from you and from the Cost of Insurance Working Group through you as to what is happening, and if things can't happen, why they can't happen, and if they can't happen, can we see if there's a way of getting around whatever barriers there are to making things happen. And equally, I think it's worthy of this committee to go back and look at our motor insurance report, see what has been delivered, what we've been told can't be delivered, and so on. And I think it is, Minister, one of the most important, I mean, like recent insurance incidents that have been in the media, they have really engaged the public in a way that I haven't seen many things engage the public. And, you know, there are lots of things you'd like the public to be engaged about, but this really took off. And fraudulent, exaggerated claims, everybody feels that, you know, there's money being given to people who don't deserve it, and the rest of us are paying for it. And that situation does pretty speedily need to be resolved. Otherwise, we're going to see a lot less restaurants, a lot less play centres, a lot less event spaces, a lot less festivals, and that's to the detriment of all of us. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I respond then, Chair? I just want to respond to those points, Chairman, if you'll allow me, please. We did write to the committee back in February. I think the media have done a really, really good job highlighting cases that needed to be highlighted. But and it is a warning that I have a concern that the vast majority of claims are legitimate. People have had an impact on their lives by carelessness, recklessness or negligence of somebody else, and they are entitled to damages. All cases are not fraudulent or exaggerated.
Thank you, Minister.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, as long as we've been dealing with this issue, which is for some time, I've let you know and let the government know that our view, People Before Profit's view, is that the only way you will get fair insurance premiums and stop the profiteering of the insurance industry is by having a not-for-profit insurance company. The sooner the better we go down that road, the sooner we'll actually get to a situation where we have fair insurance for our young people, for example, who are just, you know, completely extorted. Where we'll have a situation where taxi drivers aren't, you know, facing their livelihood being lost if they have one claim against their insurance, or we'll get past a situation where huge numbers of businesses in this country, small businesses, festivals, you name it, are literally their livelihoods and their ability to continue to function viably is threatened because of insurance extortion by insurance companies. Now, I commend the work that has been done on a cross-party basis, including by the government, yourself and others, in dealing with legitimate issues, right? And there's no doubt they are legitimate issues. Insurance fraud is wrong, and it has to be dealt with and stamped out. Excessive awards, you know, they shouldn't be excessive awards. There should be fair awards for fair claims and legitimate claims. We shouldn't have a situation where legal costs are, you know, essentially driving up the cost of insurance for people. And we should do everything we can to eliminate unnecessary legal costs and all of the other things we've talked about, to have some sort of consistency in awards and all of that, right? But you see, there's nothing in any of this that will prevent the profiteering. Nothing. And that's the problem. They will continue, the insurance companies will continue to profiteer as long as they can. Sure, why wouldn't they? They always have. And unless we do something to stop them profiteering, they always will. And that's what I put to you is the problem with all of this. And the evidence is now starting to come in. Because whatever claims they could make that it was all, you know, stuff, these sorts of reforms were necessary in order for them to bring them into online, and they weren't making money and so on and so forth, that is gone now, right? Because they are making money. And they're making a lot of money. And they're not dropping the premiums, and I don't believe for 1 minute they ever will. And that's why you can't get it in writing from them, because they're not ever going to give it in writing. And to be honest, there's nothing currently that we're proposing that will force them to reduce premiums to fair and reasonable levels, because that's not the business they're in. They're not in the business of producing, you know, ensuring that people get a fair amount of insurance, or fair insurance premiums, or indeed, they're not even in the business of making sure that everybody who needs insurance gets it. Because as we know, they'll exit from areas where they can't make a profit if they feel like it. They just decide, we're not going to do it here because we can't make a profit. They go where the profits are, and they'll do everything, and they'll use every compulsion and pressure on you and us in order to, for us to take measures which will drive up their profits. But what compulsion is there on them to feed those increased profits back into fair premiums? There's none. I put it to you, there is none.
Thank you, Chair. Deputy, and I've heard this position being presented before, that not for-profit insurance companies is the way forward. But those companies will be obliged to adhere to the same Solvency II rules as a for-profit company. They have to adhere to the same EU directives in relation to insurance and capitalisation as a for-profit company. And the issue here, Deputy, and I make this point, that while the figures look very rosy, they're only profitable for motor. The EL and the PL side are loss-making and have been loss-making for a number of years, 5-6 years in negative. And that in 2000 and I'll just give you the figures in relation to this. Sorry. The liability insurers made underwriting the loss for outside of motor in 2017 is 46.9 million. That's the liability. That's what they lost. The right EL and PL side of insurance. So there's not much profit there, Deputy. And what you're asking to do is potentially open the state up to making loss in relation to that sector. And it's something that we don't believe is the right direction. We believe we have the right pathway. You have commended all of us for the work that we're doing on this. And it isn't, and you know, I've tried to be fair to all members of both houses. To help and support in relation to this is total. There's nobody trying to implement an ideology, or there's nobody trying to be political. We're all trying to put in place a better sector so that businesses can get a fair premium, stay trading, employ people, and that the benefit to society that brings. But there is a profit on motor, but there is no profit on the liability side, and we can't just ignore that is the case. So the 227 million euros profit from 2017 is broken into 126 million of motor profit. Overall profit. So motor might be up, but it is more than that. But then the public liability is removed out of it because it's in a loss. And there's 101 million euros profits from investments. So those are from investments. So those are the actual figures. That said, and your line to me effectively, Deputy, is to keep the spotlight on the insurance companies, and I absolutely will do that. So the figures that we have to date is almost 200 million euros in profit from 3 companies from 2018. So the profits are up again from 17. I can only assume that the other 5 major companies who have to report that the figures will be increased also. And I don't want profiteering in the insurance sector. I want companies I want them to be profitable. If they're profitable, they stay, and they underwrite accordingly and underwrite well, and they treat their clients properly. And I've made this point, Deputy, I'm not sure if you've heard me make this point, that on too many occasions I have people who have contracted with an insurance company for years, decades. And then suddenly, because the risk appetite isn't there, or it suits them just to exit, they say, well, we're out, we're gone. And that to me is an appalling treatment of somebody that you have contracted with, a client of yours for years or decades. And that's wrong. And that's because it suits them, and that's because potentially they're reducing their risk appetite because it's easier to do so than to stay in the sector. And I will keep the hard line to them, Deputy, as I know you will when they come in here.
But you see, the problem is, and you didn't really respond to this point, there's nothing we can do apart from, to use your phrase, keep the spotlight on them. But there's nothing we can actually do to compel them to give fair premiums and to not profiteer. Nothing. And there's nothing we can do to stop them just exiting the market whenever it suits them for whatever reasons they decide. I would put it to you, there's probably not a lot we can do to stop them cooking the books as well, in terms of when they're making losses and when they're making profits. Because we know they can do some creative accountancy in terms of their internal operations, their parent companies, their subsidiaries. They can move money around, just like the Googles and the Facebooks do, and I absolutely suspect that's what they have been doing in order to put pressure on us to do certain things which will increase their bottom line, right? That's personally what I believe. But even aside from that, right, my point is there's nothing that we are proposing here that will prevent them from doing that,
yeah,
okay?
Thanks, Deputy. Can I just make the point, Chairman, that in relation to the profitability and
sorry, but just can you, before you come in now, there's another question I just want to say is, and you see, there's another problem. Are you saying, in terms of not-for-profit, that if somebody can't make profit out of an important insurance sector, that sector just won't have insurance? Because that's the logic of what you're saying. I mean, let's say if we take taxi drivers as an example, right? Just as an example. We need taxi drivers. Society needs them. Public transport needs them. Now, let's just say it's just not profitable for a private company to provide insurance for the taxi industry that would allow it to function. Let's say they just decide that. And it's not far off that at the moment in terms of the premiums, which threaten the livelihoods of taxi drivers if they have one claim against their insurance, right? But let's just say that the insurance companies decide, yeah, we're not insuring them because we can't make a profit. Does that mean the taxi industry would just shut down then? Because we would be precluded from stepping in where the market fails and ensuring that there is insurance in that sector? Because that's the logic of what you're saying.
But that's what is happening, Deputy. In sector by
That's
sector.
bonkers for us to allow that to happen.
Can I make the point to you, Deputy? Everything we're doing is to stop that. Everything we have done since the Cost of Insurance Working Group started, was established, was to put in place a better sector. Now, the levels of awards are the biggest issue. So recently, and you had representatives from the play zone, the kid zone area here in front of you. The state doesn't fix the prices for the kid zones, what they charge their clients. We don't do that. We don't fix the price for the taxi driver. We don't do that. And equally, we don't fix the price that the insurance companies charge to their clients.
Sorry, we do fix the price for the taxi driver.
Well, sorry, I'm making the point, individual sector by sector by sector. We don't, the state doesn't do that. The state doesn't do it. A regulator may, Deputy, but the government doesn't. That's what I'm saying to you. And it's sector by sector. You had representatives from the play zone in here. And everything we're doing is to try and make sure we have a proper market that is sustainable, like other jurisdictions. The UK market is much more stable than ours. The continental market is much more stable than ours. Their levels of awards, England and Wales, a fraction of ours for modest minor injuries. You don't get huge levels of awards for modest injuries. And I give you an example of this, Deputy, and for me it really encompassed everything that I'm trying to say and do about insurance. I got a phone call about 4 months ago from a young man in his late 20s who's a sportsman, plays football. And he was injured playing football, out for 6 weeks. Bit of damage done to his ankle. He was back playing sport, and within a month or 2 months, he was in a car crash. He was in a car crash, and he was injured, and he couldn't play sport again. He was out for 4 weeks. And after all this blew up in the last period of time, listening to people talking about exaggerated claims and fraudulent claims, he took the phone up and he rang me. And he was feeling guilty. And when I asked him, was his case fraudulent? Was he injured in the car that had a car crash? It wasn't. And when I asked him, did he exaggerate his injuries? It wasn't. And when I put it to him in relation to this, that was he within the guidelines for the award that should have happened for his damage? It was. He got 14,500. A correct amount of money for the damage within the Book of Quantum. So the point that I'm making, Deputy, is if we had to pay out for every time somebody got an injury on a football field, and you follow that on, the damage being done is the levels of awards that have been allocated, the period in which they're being settled, being dragged out over years, and the inconsistency. That's where the damage has been done
Minister,
in the sector.
I mean, look, I agree with all that, right? And it's, so, I mean, in a way,
That's good, because we don't always agree on it.
We don't, no, but I think there's actually a cross-party agreement on those things, okay, and we need to address them, and I think they are being addressed, right? So credit where credit is due, and the vast majority of these things are things that need, in and of themselves, to be done, right? Notwithstanding the fact that people do have legitimate claims, very serious injuries. And
I'm saying, I'm very clear that we need not to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No, I know you are, and that's fair enough, right? So, you know, let's not debate things we don't have to debate.
Okay.
Insurance fraud should be stamped out. Excessive awards shouldn't happen. Things being dragged on forever and ever with extortionate legal costs shouldn't happen, okay? And we need to streamline all that and drive that down in the interest of the society basically, right? Society, business, people who have to take out insurance for one reason or another, whether they're business, individuals wanting to drive a car or whatever, right? My point to you is there is no mechanism to prevent the insurance companies taking advantage of the well-intentioned work of the committee, of all the parties who are working together, of these measures they are taking. There's nothing to stop them taking advantage of it. And I put it to you, that's what they're doing. They're taking advantage of the public demand to address these things, of the political willingness of people in here to try and address these things. They're just taking us for a ride.
Okay, well...
And there's nothing to stop them doing it. And sure, why wouldn't they?
Deputy, that's why we're increasing the transparency with the National Claims Information Database on motor. We'll be doing a granular analysis within the sector to see how profitable is the sector. And that's why we want to move it towards the end of this year to start a thought process to take that into EL and PL analysis. Now, it is a bigger job. I've highlighted that. It is a very varied sector in comparison to motor. And that's why we want to be able to see exactly how profitable are they. We want to see exactly the extent of which they are profiteering or not. It may be the case, Deputy, that they are not. To be decided.
Well, I mean, I'll conclude. I'm firmly of the view they are, okay? And secondly, and as I've already said, I think we need an not-for-profit insurance company. And I also, just to add evidence to that, I mean, you know, look, if you look at road safety generally, it's improved, right, over recent years. Fatalities have gone down. Safety in the workplace has generally improved. Workplace fatalities have gone down.
But the awards have gone up.
Yeah, okay, and again, we agree on that point. But there's something wrong. As Charlie Weston rightly puts it, there's something wrong in the Irish insurance industry. And it's not just about these things.
And that's why we're trying to fix it, Deputy.
And a very last question. So I've made my point. I won't go over it, right? But I think we'll be here again, Minister. Unfortunately, that's the point. I think we'll be here again dealing with high insurance premiums in 2 years when all this has gone through because they're profiteering. But one very specific question: the Taxi Advisory Committee and the engagement with them on the specific problems faced by the taxi industry. It's something I've raised many times with you and I think your predecessor. And I understand one meeting happened between Insurance Ireland and the Taxi Advisory Committee, and a report was given to you. Could you tell us what happened with that? Because there is a particular difficulty for taxi drivers.
That's on to the Minister for Transport, Deputy.
Okay, and do you know where, can you tell us, is anything like practical coming out of it? Is there anything going to be done
it's a matter
for taxi drivers?
Matter for the Minister for Transport.
That's as much as you can tell us. Yeah? So I have to ask him. Okay.
Just a report, Deputy.
Well, the issue was raised repeatedly by me and others, I think, and the most important by taxi drivers, that premiums for them were so high that their livelihood was at risk. You know, if they even had the slightest prang, it could push their premiums to a point where it just wasn't viable to operate as a taxi driver. And that still is, you know, a particular problem. And we need taxis, right? So something had to be done about that. And what I think was agreed in the, you know, in the tasks that you set yourself was that the Taxi Advisory Committee would meet with Insurance Ireland with a view to looking at the specific problems faced by taxi drivers in terms of insurance, and then a report would come from that. And I just want to know what's coming out of that. And is it going to address the problems faced by taxi drivers?
That was passed on to the Minister for Transport, Deputy. But what I did do was, I met a taxi company recently, and what I did was I did speak with an insurance company to see would they be prepared to conduct a pilot program in relation to the installation of dash cams, in relation to the installation of the black boxes, so that the insurance company is able to have data to see what speed the drivers are driving at, to see are they within the correct speed limits, and to see would that have a reduction on taxis. So that pilot scheme is being considered at the moment. That's what I did.
Yeah. Barrett, Minister, would you tell us, if that report was all about insurance in terms of taxis, why was it passed on to the Senior Minister?
Yeah, so the Cost Insurance Working Group Chair operates on the basis of a number of departments: Department of Justice, Business, Transport, Finance. We also have the National Claim State Agency, PIAB, and the Central Bank. But while I chair the group, the particular actions potentially are a matter for each individual department. My role is to push each department to try and get things done, and to make sure that as many of the actions as possible are done.
So does that mean then that you'll be pushing the Minister in relation to Deputy Boyd Barrett's question?
Correct.
It's not just gone to the Minister, that there is a time frame within which he has to return to you with an answer?
Yeah, so in relation to that, Deputy, or Chairman, I pushed that on to the Minister, for the Minister for Transport to deal with the matter. I don't have, again, no differently with Business or Justice. My role isn't, and I don't have the authority to tell them to do this or deal with it. But I forwarded it on to the Minister of Transport.
Okay. Senator Lord.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thanks to the Minister and his team for coming in here this afternoon. I would ask the Minister, would he correct his opening statement on page 2, where he says award levels are the prerogative of the court, and therefore for constitutional reasons judiciary cannot be directed as the level that should be applied. The Civil Bill 1961 refers where there is awards which were brought forward by the Constitution, or sorry, by the Oireachtas, are constantly being updated all along. So it is possible for the Oireachtas to prescribe awards, and that's for the death of someone and the awards associated. So it is possible that that's under the civil license. So you just might like to correct that?
No, I'll clarify that, Senator.
It's page 2 under 1. Yeah.
Just there's a number.
Civil Bill 1961, which.
Yeah, there's a number of opinions on this, and that's a matter for.
Hold on. Can I just say?
Yeah.
That is a piece of legislation. It's in since 1961. It has been constantly updated by the minister, relevant ministry.
Not for personal injury, Deputy or Senator.
Well, it is. It would be.
No.
It's an award for damages on the death of someone. So it is.
Yeah. So there's a range of opinion, Senator. So you've made your statement, and that's your opinion. I've pursued in relation to the constitutionality of the Oireachtas being allowed to pursue a capping of awards, and the Law Reform Commission will come back to us. I am obliged to take the opinion of the Attorney General, and all those other opinions, yours included, are opinions. The only one that I'm legally obliged to take is his. And so I won't be changing my statement. The information that I have is it is a matter for the judiciary. And what I would say in relation to this, we have a pathway of how we deal with this for the Personal Injury Commission report, the Judicial Council. The judiciary will review the guidelines, I hope very soon. And I don't want to have a constitutional crash between the Oireachtas and the judiciary. It's not what I want, it's not what I'm looking for, nor do I think that would be beneficial, because if we can do this in a quick and efficient manner, we'll deal with the matter. If we want to go banging heads with the judiciary, the Oireachtas, we'll be wrapped up in the courts for years.
I haven't mentioned anything yet. I just asked you would you have a look at that, because there's a civil bill there.
No, I won't be looking at it, Deputy. Okay, I have the opinion.
That's your opinion.
Yeah.
We'll differ on that. Just from regard to, obviously, we're going through the 8th progress update of the cost of insurance working group. One of the things, the Judicial Council bill, which is coming before the Shannon next Thursday, we still haven't seen the additional amendments that you're proposing to bring forward, or sorry, the Minister for Justice is proposing to bring forward. Could you give us a time frame as to when us, the senators, will get a look at these amendments that you're proposing to bring forward?
Should be available there tomorrow.
Okay, all right. The one problem I have about guidelines is there's no legal basis for them.
Sorry?
Guidelines. There's no legal basis for them. They don't have to be adhered to by the judiciary. The Judicial Council may prescribe what they feel as awards, and you've indicated earlier on that if pathway A, which we're following on the Judicial Council bill, doesn't follow, there's pathway B, which is the LRC are looking at the moment, which coincides with my piece of legislation about the capping awards, and you've indicated pathway C would be the
referendum.
The referendum, yeah. Like, what worries me about guidelines, judges don't have to adhere to them, just like and there will always be a case whereby the legal profession will refer back to, because you're only dealing with guidelines, refer back to previous cases, and so the awards could be challenged, whatever the Judicial Council committee or the Judicial Council bill proposes to deal with that. So it just makes me nervous from that perspective that there will not be any adherence by the judiciary by what the guidelines that will be prescribed through the committee that will be set up during it. Just what do you propose?
Yeah, in relation to the bill, Senator, as I said earlier, the insurance side of this is a small corner of the Judicial Council bill itself. It's a pretty radical reformation of how the judiciary are operate. So part of that will be of how you upskill members of the judiciary, of how you question if the member goes outside of the guidelines, and that there will be peer review of sentencing. So that's a matter for the judiciary to resolve themselves.
Okay, just still on that there, is if the LRC report that it is constitutional for the Oireachtas to put a cap on awards, does the Minister envisage bringing forward or legislation to put those a cap in place?
Yeah, that will be a matter for the Minister for Justice and not for myself. But I would hope and anticipate, well, I'd hope and anticipate that it won't be required, that the guidelines will be in line with the PIC report, and if they're in line with the PIC report, there shouldn't be a requirement for those guidelines, or sorry, for a cap on the awards. But then, of course, if the LRC report back to us, it's a matter for the Attorney General then to determine if we have the authorisation to do so. The LRC will be a guide, it won't be an indication, but that will be a matter for the AG.
Again, that will be an opinion of the AG.
The only opinion that matters.
Right, okay. Just on the examination of the impact of legal and other fees on personal injury awards, that's an action that's ongoing. Why is there a delay in that, and who is responsible for delivery of that? Yeah, again,
Senator, part of the issue here has been not having information, not having data. So we don't have the data to know the exact figures, and until we get the data, the analysis, how much is spent upon legal, how much is spent upon the legal process, what percentage, we're in a position that we really can't move. So I'll read the note. So the Department of Justice wasn't able to source a reliable information stream with regard to legal costs, so we don't know the actual figures. The implementation of the recommendation is contingent on the establishment of the Office of Legal Cost Adjudicators as provided for the Legal Service Regulation Act 15. The establishment of the OLC is on target and to take place at the end of quarter 2/19, so we're looking at establishing that towards the end of this quarter. This includes a number of supporting legislative amendments that are, of course, subject to the Oireachtas. So the Cost of Insurance Working Group understands that a period of at least 1 or 2 years from this time that this new body becomes operational will be required before an appropriate level of data is available to commence with a meaningful view.
So everything is further on.
No, that's in line. Sorry, that's in line with the period that we said it would be.
Okay. It just says within that the estimate start date of the OLCA has been constantly deferred.
Pardon?
It has been constantly deferred, so there's no guarantee that it will happen in quarter 2 2019. So we are in quarter 2 2019. You're saying, and there's only a couple of weeks left in quarter 2, so it's not going to happen in quarter 2 2019. So it's deferred again.
Well, it's a matter for the Department of Justice, again, similar to the Department of Transport.
Right, so again, I would just look at that and say the legal profession are doing their damnness to make sure that they don't give the information. That's all. That's what I'm gathering from your answer there.
Well, the NCI, National Claims Information Database, will provide a lot of data as well, Senator. Right. And we will have that available before the end of this year.
Okay. Just a couple of more queries on it. The court services to publish the results of personal injury cases in a more granular way in its annual report. Has this happened?
I'll get that. I'll read the note for you, Senator. So the Court Service have indicated to the Department of Justice that they will publish a more detailed breakdown of awards in the injury cases in its 2018 annual report. So the details of awards and medical negligence will be published separately, so we stripped those out to try and have a better insight into personal injury. The publication of more granular information with regard to personal injury awards will provide a further level of clarity around the average awards provided, and if there are particular trends in the awards provided. So they haven't published their 2018 report yet, but it is in line to be published in their report when they provide it.
Okay. The LRC in the work programme, have they given you any indication as to when they will publish their opinion? Or sorry, their findings regarding the capping of damages?
Okay. Yeah. So the LRC have stated that they will be consulting, or they'll be publishing a consultation paper before the end of this year, and then they will have the opportunity for civic bodies, groups, organisations to feed into that consultation, and then they will publish the findings at some point in 2020.
And the other thing, I suppose, for most of us who would, whether we're involved in accident or not, there will be, and we're involved in claims. When we expect to see that the notification for people who are who will be having claims against them, when do we expect to see that enacted?
Which
you
one?
know, yeah.
The PI. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the LRC report that says Deputy Doherty is providing his bill, which is the insurance contracts consumer bill. We will have committee stage, we believe, before the end of this term, and we are attaching it to that bill.
Okay. Okay. All right. That. One more query here. Sorry. Yeah, the Personal Injury Committee, the first report that was made, and it said one of the recommendations was the court rules committees are considering the possibility of amending the relevant court rules in order to require reports to be proceeded in a standardised format. When will this happen?
Which one?
This is under the first PIC report.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that, Deputy. I will revert to you on that.
Okay. Minister, I suppose from my own viewpoint, and the Judicial Council bill coming before the Shannon next week, how much this will have a positive impact on the cost of insurance for ordinary citizens and businesses, I'm not sure. I think it'll take a period of time because, as you know, it has to go through the Oireachtas, and then a committee has to be set up, the judiciary, which will have a review and decide. And we could be Chair, we could be discussing this in 2 years' time, with no change in the awards that are being paid. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's one leg of a stool. You've indicated already in your initial comments here that there is no one silver bullet. As far as I'm concerned, one of the legs of this stool is the awards are being paid out by the judiciary, and it is a problem that has been caused by the judiciary because they have increased the awards on an annual basis. It has been shown that on average they go between €700 and €900 per annum for a variety of awards without any justification. But I do hope that we first of all get Judicial Council bill through the Shannon as quickly as possible and through the Oireachtas as quickly as possible, that you initiate the legislation, the various stages that have to be signed off on you, whether there's as quickly as possible, so this committee that you're proposing, that I haven't seen yet, can be established as quickly as possible. And from that, I would hope that we don't need to bring legislation forward that will have the cap damages, because perception out there is that government is dragging its heels on it. I don't believe they are. I think this is a complex matter, but we need to deal with it quickly, because there are, as people have indicated earlier on today, there are businesses, farmers, communities, festivals, shows, and ordinary citizens with driving their motor vehicles that are suffering as a result of this cost of it. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Senator. I mean, absolutely, government is not dragging our heels on this. The PIC report was last September, and You know, we had anticipated it would be done by the end of 2018. That didn't happen. I think it was Deputy Doherty who highlighted the filibuster that was happening. The Judicial Appointments Bill was ahead of the Judicial Council Bill. It wasn't unreasonable for the Minister for Justice to go in line with where the legislation was in the Shannon. But again, there's been very little comment about the filibuster that we got stuck behind. And only for that filibuster, this would be finished, done, completed, and the judiciary would be doing the work right now.
If I could,
Sure.
Minister, just reflect on the meeting and the previous meetings that we've had in relation to this issue. It's like Groundhog Day, to be honest. And I've listened carefully to all of what you've had to say, and I don't question your dedication to the task of, writing all of this insurance costs and so on. But businesses that have been before us here and individual motorists that have complained to us, they haven't had any satisfaction whatsoever out of this. And I know it's a different thing you said.
In motor.
You're talking about EL and PL.
Yeah.
But a business is a business. It runs on their, employer's liability, public liability, motor insurance. And I have yet to meet a business that will openly say, my insurance was cut by 25%. Only today I received a text.
On motors, Deputy Chairman.
No, and bear with me,
Business,
on
sorry,
every
okay,
business.
okay.
Because you can't just single out motor and say, we'll deal with public liability later on. When you're dealing in the current marketplace, you are a business, you're giving employment, nothing has happened. There has been no change. In spite of what I read in various media outlets, you'll get an odd press release claiming that insurance has come down. It hasn't. I can tell you in the transport business, it hasn't come down. It has actually significantly increased. I can tell you the man that texted me this morning, because he knew this meeting was coming up, told me that in his business, insurance costs had increased over the last 3 years by 200%. The marts were in with us. They just can't get insurance. So when people outside of the Oireachtas here are watching and listening to what we're doing, they're not interested in the different avenues you have to travel to go under to deal with the different headings of insurances. They're interested in one thing. Has my house insurance gone up? Has my motor insurance gone up? Has my PL and EL gone up? And the answer to most of those questions is it has. And
Chairman,
just let me finish. Just let me finish. You mentioned the taxi drivers, or Deputy Boyd Barrett did earlier on. He mentioned the taxi drivers. You could pick transport companies, you could pick farmers, you could pick marts. They'll all tell you the same thing. Their insurance costs are gone sky high. Now, the report that Deputy Boyd Barrett was talking about, presumably it's about insurance, and it went then, you say, to the Minister for Transport, was it? Yeah. Isn't that really the problem? That there are so many within government, so many have a finger in the pie of insurances in terms of legislation or regulation, that this thing is going to get dragged on forever. And the insurance companies love it. Because once they see the government struggling to get to grips with this, they're getting away with it. And they are making huge profits. They're not charities. And I can tell you that they would not be in the business for the sake of charity or without a profit. They're making profits. And they've concealed information, they've kept information from us. they've been reluctant to deal with you and to deal with the working group. They've had to be dragged to that table. So what the business person or the individual motorist want, when is my premium going to be reduced?
Thanks, Chair. And I know you say, and you're right, that the individual who is in charge of a business isn't interested in the pathway. But I have to be, Chair.
Isn't interested, sorry?
In the pathway of how we get the reform done. I have to be. I'm obliged to be. I'm obliged to adhere to the separation of powers. I'm obliged to highlight that the state doesn't have any role in pricing of insurance products. And I can't ignore that. And the work that I do, I'm determined to do it and not end up wrapped up in court for years. Because if I don't take the correct pathway, that's what will happen. And that serves nobody, Chair. Marts can't get insurance. I was in the Mart 3 weeks ago. The Mart I was in has insurance. So your point about insurance, is it going up? Yes. And the insurance in Marts is expensive. It's expensive because you're putting on the very successful Marts 600, 800, 900, 1,000 large animals into a venue, and you're putting them in with people, and there are work practices that in some of the Marts were not good work practices. And I've raised this with the main insurer of the Marts in the country, one particular insurance company. And a lot of the health and safety reports that are done, that are concluded with the works carried out, have made sure that those Marts are insured. Some of the smaller Marts potentially don't have enough business to cover the extra work that's to be done to bring up the health and safety standards. I've seen the film Groundhog Day, Chairman, the Bill Murray character. I'm not sure if you're Bill Murray, or there's a guy in it called Phil, and Bill Murray comes along and says, how are you, Phil, every day? I've been here before. And I'm keep pushing the proposals that we're doing, the work that we're doing. Cost of Insurance Working Group is on the go for 30 months. We highlighted that all of these proposals would take time. So whether you're Bill Murray and I'm Phil, or I'm Phil and you're Bill Murray, whatever the case may be, Chairman, I don't know. But we're nearing the end of it. We're nearing the end of it, in particular for the biggest issue, as I see it, the levels of awards. And when you're done, we get the levels of awards down, we reduce them down. Your role and my role and the role of the committee is to keep the spotlight on the insurance companies to make sure that they don't go and try and pocket potential windfall amounts because we've reduced the awards, so that if people are damaged for a moderate injury, they get a moderate payment. And that is what we have to do. We cannot allow the insurance companies to do that. And I'm absolutely determined, and I know you will be as well, Chairman. And you have as big a role as me, because you have a public forum in which you can bring the insurance companies in one by one and keep the hard line to them, as I do in private.
Well, can I say to you, Minister, that that doesn't seem to be working? This is the point I'm making. As you and I talk about this, as this committee...
But what I would say...
Sorry. As this committee deals with it, as your working group deals with it, there are businesses out there right across the sector of the economy, that are being forced to close or curtail their activities because of insurances. There are different types of insurances. And I just believe that that's something that cannot be... one sector can't hold all of the other sectors to ransom, basically. In the Marts, there's one insurance company that insures most of them. Most of them have experienced significant increases. Take the taxi industry, and I met with them a number of weeks ago, and I have to say that the increases that they have experienced, there's no justification for it, none. And can I just turn to your report?
Can I just make a point? Can I just respond to that point?
Wherever there is... sorry, 1 second.
I don't want to forget the answer to that.
No, just take a note. Okay. You have two fellows beside you there, they can take notes as well. I have no one beside me. I'm looking here at your report, and wherever there is a report mentioned, or a protocol mentioned, or a piece of legislation mentioned, that sort of gets done. But the hard part of it, which is giving information to the consumer, that doesn't get done. That's too intricate to do, according to these recommendations. Go to your first recommendation here and bring it through them. Insurers set out reasons for large increases in premiums to consumers. That's ongoing.
No, sorry, that's been attached to the legislation that Deputy Doherty is presenting.
That's what I said, it's ongoing.
Yeah, but, Chair, I would...
But what's to stop the insurance companies from just giving the information? If my insurance premium goes up by €1,000 or it doubles, surely I'm entitled to sit down with my broker or my insurance company and say, why is that going up when I've had no claims? And they won't even answer you.
As I said, we couldn't get them to do it. They wouldn't do it voluntarily, so we're adding it to the legislation.
But does that not tell you something about them?
But, Chairman, everything that we're doing with nearly the entire sector is done kicking and screaming.
So that tells you everything about it.
Well, that's the position that I find myself in, Chairman.
Well, you know, in the context of the position that you find yourself in, then the government should give everything to the one person, that's you, not sending it as the report was sent from, you know, the working group to the Minister for Transport. And whatever is required to be done should be done immediately. I mean, that simple example there of information being asked from a service provider, it doesn't apply in any other sector. Why are you charging so much for a piece of meat or a piece of a service that you're giving? And you can't answer them. They won't. Well, they certainly won't pay you. They shouldn't.
Well, I can't make them answer, Chair.
Well, that's the problem. I'm actually going to leave it at that, because that answers everything.
But can I make the point, answer your question in relation to one sector can't hold all the other sectors? The one dynamic that is across all the sectors, Chairman, is the level of awards. So whether it's if somebody gets injured in the mart, they end up in court, and it's the level of award that's causing the damage. Whether it's a taxi driver, it's the same. It could be the same damage. Could be a broken arm or a broken leg or whatever the case may be. But the high levels of awards are the biggest issue that we're dealing with. The Judicial Council bill will be before the Shannon next Thursday. I hope we can get it into the Dáil the following week, so that we can move into second stage, get committee stage and report stage concluded before the end of the session. And when all is said and done as well, Chairman, I want to make one point about the insurance companies, that if it was as profitable as what is being presented, they wouldn't be exiting to the point that they have, that we have 8 insurance companies who have between 89 and 92% of the entire market in our small jurisdiction.
I just give you another example here of information. Right? When a claim is being settled, and it happens regularly again in transport taxis and wherever there's a big volume of vehicles involved in the business. And just to be told about the settlement, that's always been asked for here. And that recommendation is delayed, because it says here that the Department of Finance failed to reach agreement with Insurance Ireland.
Yeah.
But surely as a business, I'm entitled to know I'm paying my premium.
No, you're not.
No, I'm paying my premium.
No, you're not entitled. Sorry.
Hang on, but then make them do it.
But that's what we're doing with the legislation that's being attached to Deputy Doherty's bill. So
recommendation delayed.
Sorry, Chairman, you've said to me to make them do it, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and I'll just go back to the point that they are calling the shots. They are not cooperating with you.
Well, whether they cooperate or not with me, Chairman, if I have to pass legislation to do these types of things, I will do so. We thought we would get them to a point where they would do so voluntarily, and that turned out to be wrong. So what we decided then...
Which again tells you a lot about them.
Well, that's the environment that I'm working in, Chairman.
That brings us to the end of our meeting.
Can I say, Chairman, I do again want to put on the record my thanks to you as the Chairman of the committee, the members of the committee, and the members of both houses who have been extremely helpful towards me, the section in relation to insurance. I'd love to be a lot faster than we are as well, Chair. But these are the confines in which I find myself working in. But that doesn't mean that we will lessen our intensity and our drive to improve the sector.
Okay, thank you very much to you, Minister, and your officials. Meeting now adjourned until the 18th of June, 3:45.